Sony had a great run with the PS4, and there has been no shortage of compelling first-party output from its studios during the last generation. However, there has also been an equal share of underrated games that didn't quite get the love and attention they deserve, and this feature will talk about 15 such examples. Infamous Second Son. The Infamous series peaked during the PS3 days with Infamous 2, and while Infamous Second Son was well received by critics, it didn't really have the same magnitude of an impact as its brothers. And that's quite a shame because Second Son is a well-made game that makes good use of the PS4's capabilities to render a beautiful open world alongside some solid gameplay mechanics. The Last Guardian. Fumito Ueda is widely considered to be a video game auteur thanks to his work on Ico and Shadow of the Colossus, and The Last Guardian is a project that had been in development for a long time. But when it was released in 2016, the game was met with a divisive critical reception, primarily because the companion dog would refuse to listen to your instructions at times, which made it a really frustrating experience at times. To be honest, those aren't technical problems, but a conscious decision on the developer's part, and that, combined with the unique world and themes of the story, makes The Last Guardian a truly special game that deserves to be experienced by a lot more people. Days Gone. Days Gone was Sony Bend's take on a post-apocalyptic open-world game, and it turned out to be one of the more disappointing first-party games of its time. It would be an utter lie to state that Days Gone is a spotless masterpiece, but it's also a game that perhaps got a lot more hate than it deserves. The bike riding mechanics are pretty good for the most part, and the Freaker Horde mechanics are fun to interact with, even though the game holds that particular part hostage until the very end. It's not a life-changing game by any means, but it is a fun open world nevertheless. No Man's Sky. Hello Games' CEO Sean Murray created a lot of headlines with his brief on how No Man's Sky would be a game of endless possibilities, but those claims were turned to dust when the game finally came out in 2016. No Man's Sky took place in a bland world where there wasn't anything interesting to do, and the procedural generation of planets felt like a faint shadow of the big promises that he made pre-release. Fans were understandably upset, which made it a disappointing game back then, but the team has put in the hard work to turn the game into a much better version through consistent content updates and overhauls. As it stands now, No Man's Sky is easily one of the best space exploration games on the market, and is absolutely unmissable for genre fans. Gravity Rush 2. Gravity Rush 2 thrusts players into a fantastical world and takes them on a journey like no other, and an interesting gravity shift mechanic sits at the epicenter of everything you do. It's a beautiful game that excels in more aspects than one, but it's a shame that not many people actually played it in the first place. A lot of that could be blamed on the incompetent marketing by Sony, and that limited exposure ultimately turned Gravity Rush 2 into a cult classic. Sniper Elite 4. Sniper Elite 4 puts us back in the shoes of Carl Fairburn as he embarks on increasingly difficult missions behind enemy lines. The series has always never been so polished in terms of its mechanics or story, which is perhaps why Sniper Elite 4 never really got much mainstream attention. But if you are able to look past those flaws, you will find a truly dynamic stealth game where you can make some really creative use of your toolset and come up with unique solutions for your problems. Just Cause 3. The Just Cause series has been in a downward spiral following the success of Just Cause 2, and Just Cause 3's rather tepid commercial reception is proof of that theory. Just Cause 3 did a good job of building upon the concepts of prior games, and critics generally liked the game. But many fans weren't really interested in its brand of chaos-driven open-world gameplay, and that's disappointing news because creatively, wreaking havoc in this game continues to be an extremely satisfying activity even after dozens upon dozens of hours. Astrobot Rescue Mission. Astrobot Rescue Mission is a game built to showcase the capabilities of PSVR, and you might be forgiven for discarding it as just a glorified tech demo of sorts. But that's not really the case here, because Astrobot Rescue Mission is a really polished and fun platformer that is more than the sum of its parts. It makes good use of the VR capabilities to really immerse you in its world, and there are plenty of smart touches peppered throughout this adventure that make it so charming. The Dark Pictures anthology House of Ashes. Supermassive Games' The Dark Pictures anthology House of Ashes follows a group of soldiers exploring an ancient temple and coming face to face with the many horrors that lie within. The story is well written, and it can take some sharp turns depending on the choices that you make at critical points of the adventure. Between this flexibility and a strong visual presentation, the Dark Pictures anthology House of Ashes is a very solid horror game that fans of the genre should definitely check out. Concrete Genie. Developed by Pixel Opus Studios, Concrete Genie is a charming game about using your creative powers to bring a murky town back to life. The gameplay is simple, yet works well within the context of the experience, and that, combined with the wonderful story, makes it a game worthy of your attention. It's a sad state of affairs that it never got the audience it deserves, and a lot of that can be blamed on poor marketing from Sony. Alien Nation. Alien Nation comes from Housemarque, the team that recently released Returnal to some excellent critical and commercial acclaim. Alien Nation is a twin-stick shooter that tasks you to control different kinds of super soldiers, each with their different sets of strengths and weaknesses. The gameplay is an absolute blast through and through, and the developer has done a good job of adding even more content to the experience. The Surge 2. The Surge 2 takes what worked in the original and cranked it all the way up to 11, which resulted in an experience that's big in almost every regard. The Surge 2 takes players to wonderfully well-realized locales and pits them against brutal bosses, but the game wasn't really able to capture much of an audience when it released in 2019, most likely due to an oversaturation of Souls-likes at that point. If you were one of the people who skipped it back in the day, give it another try and you might really be surprised. Yakuza 0. The Yakuza series has started to gain a lot of traction in the West, and recent entries like Yakuza Like a Dragon have been widely praised by fans. Yakuza 0 didn't get the praises of the same intensity, and that's a shame because it is a really great open world game that condenses a ton of variety content within a rather small virtual district. It seamlessly switches between serious moments and goofy antics at the flip of a button, and that adds a really distinct charm to it all. What Remains of Edith Finch. What Remains of Edith Finch is a moving tale about the tragedies that happen to the Finch family. It's a simple game that looks like a walking simulator on the surface, but it features some really interesting level design that expertly uses mechanics and visual imagery to tell its engaging stories. It's also a really snappy experience that doesn't waste much of your time with exposition or filler, so you could blast through it all in just a couple of hours. Infamous First Light. Infamous First Light is a surprisingly fleshed out standalone expansion that puts players in the shoes of Abigail Walker from the base game. The gameplay is largely based on the same foundations as Second Son, which is to say it's an absolute blast through and through. It's a great excuse to explore the many corners of this beautifully recreated fictional Seattle, and it's unmissable for fans of the franchise. So, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.